I'm going to be talking about resilience and actually the role of digital tools and data to enhance that. So I'm going to start off by just talking about why I'm talking about resilience. And so obviously, as we've all experienced over the last 18 months, we are living in an increasingly VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex and ambiguous world. Lots going on, lots of change, lots of disruption, lots of things we have to deal with. And so resilience has really come to the fore in terms of what we're looking at Arup, especially in the climate space as well, and sustainability. So lots of things to be thinking about. And so we're advising our clients on how to kind of understand the complexity really and this ambiguity and uncertainty that they have to deal with, and helping them kind of plot a course around resilience. So what is resilience? I always like to put some definitions up because it does mean different things to different people. The capacity of cities, individuals, communities, institutions, businesses, and systems to survive, adapt, and thrive, no matter what kinds of chronic stresses and acute shocks. That's from Rockefeller. This one is probably my favorite. This is the ability to prepare for and adapt to changing conditions and to withstand and recover rapidly from disruptions. And the short and sweet, is the ability to absorb and adapt in a changing environment. And so I'll draw to your attention here, a lot of the time when we think about resilience, we think about specific shocks and then mitigating those shocks. And as engineers, we tend to do that by, designing in. But obviously there are lots of other strategies that I want to sort of talk to you about as well for resilience. And this aspect of changing and being able to deal with this, being able to adapt to a different environment is incredibly important too. So we need to think about that in our designs. I put this together for colleagues actually during COVID in terms of thinking about, what our clients are going through and how we at Arup actually help our clients during something such as COVID. So if you think about before an event, you want to try and anticipate as much as you can and prepare and mitigate. These are the things that we do to to help our clients. So it might be in terms of like risk assessments, horizon scanning, looking ahead, what might happen, how can we prepare for that, what should we do, what plans need to be in place, how can we kind of strengthen our systems. And then you have an event such as COVID, and obviously their organization goes into sort of response mode, as we did as well. And so you're kind of, you have your incident and crisis management, figuring out what's going on, getting information, and then making decisions quite rapidly about what we need to do. And then obviously we sort of adapted to the situation. So we all ended up working from home, and that was a massive adaptation we had to go through. And so we've all had to have, reserves of resilience to get through the last 18 months. And now hopefully we're on that path to recovery. So we kind of need to sort of still be thinking about, okay, we need to get back to whatever our new normal is. But also keep an eye on, other things that might come up and disrupt us, but also think about what can we learn from the last, 18 months or so, what things have actually worked really well, and actually transform what we do. There's an opportunity here to transform ourselves into a different place that's actually better than it was before. And so this is that sort of resilient cycle. It's being able to think about all those aspects and advise our clients on, looking across that whole spectrum, what can they do and how can we help? So that's sort of the sort of thing that I'm doing. So in terms of technology, obviously technology is very important in terms of actually enhancing society and resilience. We've got all these new things coming in, whether it's AI, automation, 3D printing. These are all positive. I call them, you've got shocks and stresses. They are stresses, but they can be very positive because they can have a very positive effect on our lives. But we also need to think about the fact that these can also become a vulnerability. So obviously cyber threats, data breaches are becoming more commonplace. We saw quite recently in the news, particularly in the US, the oil pipeline was attacked by some cyber attackers and brought that down for about a week. And then there was also a meat company that got cyber attacked. And so it's starting to affect our critical infrastructure, and that becomes a serious problem. So what I would say about this tension between sort of resilience and technology is, yes, technology can enhance us, but we just need to be aware of the vulnerabilities we might be creating and make sure that we're mitigating those. So I'm just going to give you a few examples of some of the work we're doing around resilience and how we're using digital tools and data to enhance that and improve things. This is the study we did of the UK food sector, so looking at supply chain within food. And this was sort of on the back of Brexit and sort of wondering how are we going to be disrupted. And so we use data to kind of gather, we do evidence-based work, so we want to gather as much data as possible. So we have, we use a lot of geospatial remote sensing to kind of gather information. And here we're looking at sort of locations of part of that supply chain. We're looking at the transportation, the freight systems, all of those components of that supply chain to understand what it looks like, and then we can look at, well, what might be the potential disruption, where are those vulnerabilities, what might we be able to do to prepare for that. And so this is just one example. This is one I've just put together actually, and this is hot off the press. So I lead energy resilience within Arup, and so we've been looking at how to maintain a resilient transition as we decarbonize the sector, obviously. And so this was quite interesting. We've been gathering data about energy outages across the world over the last 5 years, and then categorizing those into resilience kind of issues. And so looking at what were the reasons for these outages, and it's actually quite surprising the number. There's a very sort of lack of resilience is definitely there. And so we've looked at things like, was this caused by climate change? Was this caused by poor governance? Fragmentation, silos is a usual problem with resilience. Unsustainable finance. There are lots of things. Resilience can be very broad, and so we've kind of categorized that to really sort of show, we really need to keep an eye on resilience, especially when we start, this massive change we're embarking on in terms of decarbonisation. So I mentioned remote sensing, and some of my colleagues are using this again to kind of to help with our resilience. And so this is a study in Tashkent in Uzbekistan, and we were doing some urban resilience work for the World Bank. And so here they created this digital geospatial land use model of the entire city, and they mapped buildings, infrastructure, and open space, as well as population and economic activity. And we did something really similar. I did a project actually was at Bir Happold in Beirut, and we used geospatial kind of mapping to kind of have layers of data and then show, the resilience, the risk across the city, and then the vulnerabilities. And so it's a really great, really great tools for visualizing, and our clients really appreciate it because obviously there's a lot of information, very complex. So we use this all the time to convey it in a way that our clients can understand. So systems thinking is really, really important for resilience. And it's because when you think about it, we design buildings or we design infrastructure, but they're there for a purpose and they're linked to multiple systems. And so you can't have a resilient building in isolation. It's part of a system. You have the infrastructure that comes in, you have the highways that feed them, you have the people that work there. And so you can't think about just the resilience of a physical asset. You need to understand these layers of an interconnectivity. And so we use system mapping and we do interdependency analysis between those nodes to understand, what are those connectivities? How important are they? What would happen if that came out? What risk might take that out? How can we prevent that from happening? And what would we do if that happened? And so it's kind of these sort of scenarios and interdependencies that we want to understand. This is an example of some mapping I did for an airport. And so kind of understanding, that flow of what happens at an airport, what are the components that need to work in order to get people from A to B. And so we have there sort of this airport particularly, 40% of their revenues from car parking, 40% is from the actual airline, and then 20% retail. So they have a number of things that are really important to them functioning. And so from as kind of simple as they have, online parking. So you manage your parking, you book it, you come, you have ANPR, which reads number plates that lets you in. And so what happens if that goes down? Suddenly no one can get in and park, and then everybody's late for their. So you kind of need to just think about these connections and the consequences of things not working. And what you see here, the size of the bubbles indicates the importance of those functions for delivering the airport's kind of objectives. And then the big red blobs here are essentially the ones that have the least resilience. And so then we can start kind of digging down. And here, this was around power, single point of failure, no backup generator for the and a limited supply. And so we've actually done some work subsequently in terms of looking at their energy resilience. A really helpful way of showing something quite complex and being able to layer over information. And obviously, once you can actually then sort of take this type of model and then layer on lots of other information about these points in the system. We also use it obviously for risk analysis. So risk is a very important part of a resilient strategy. So we want to understand what the risk is for our clients. So we use simulation to model different events, whether it's earthquakes, whether it's floods. And this is some modeling we did, hurricane, flooding and tornado risk. And this was for some data centers in the US. So we're using computational fluid dynamics, we're using performance-based design to kind of understand the effect on structures. But here we're just particularly modeling the hazard. And we're doing that actually for a lot of portfolios around the globe, particularly on the back of climate change, with the changes obviously to risk due to climate. The good thing about technology is obviously that ability to experiment virtually. So you can kind of, and what's quite interesting here is this is 3D printing, but if you think about the ability to generate this type of model and this sort of generative modeling that we're doing, where we can kind of put parameters in, and I'm thinking, well, can we put a parameter around resilience? How do you make a structure more resilient? That's one of the things we're trying to optimize, but we're also trying to make things resilient, which is a bit of a obviously a tension there. And so just it's quite interesting to be able to use these tools to experiment with a number of parameters, and resilience can be one of those, and then be able to actually print it. So this type of structure looks pretty resilient. I mentioned performance-based analysis. This is some work I did a number of years ago. So on the left there, you've got some blast analysis, so performance-based blast design. On the right, you've got performance-based seismic engineering and putting, building a model of that building and putting earthquakes through it and seeing how it actually performs. And on the left, understanding the amount of potential damage from a blast and how that would affect the occupants, and then how much downtime you would have and how long it would take to get up and running. And then that's that opportunity then to talk to your client and say, this is potentially what might happen, this is the sort of risk of this, is that an acceptable performance, do you want to invest in hardening this, or it might feed into your response and recovery planning. So this is the type of thing we're doing with our clients at the moment. It's really helping them understand the potential impact to their business in terms of that downtime and impact and time to recovery and cost obviously as well. More recently, we've been doing obviously using simulations to look at social distancing. So kind of coming in and out of a building, how do we manage social distancing? So previously we'd obviously use this mass motion tool for just people flow modeling and sort of exiting, fire emergencies and what have you. So we've been utilizing that for COVID related issues. And then obviously post, once you've actually designed and constructed your building, your client is running it. And so thinking about using situational awareness essentially is that ability to understand what's going on around you. And that's incredibly important for resilience, because you want to have a warning about something's coming your way, I need to prepare, what's going on. And so the use of sensor technology for that. So for example, early warning systems on the left there, we're doing some work in Japan at the moment where they have an early warning system, and where you can get your P wave from your earthquake can come in before your S wave, and so you can have a short bit of notice that something's going to happen, but you can start putting systems into safe mode, and so that can make a difference in terms of the response and recovery. And again, if we've got kind of sensors on our structures, for example, that can tell us how much damage there is to that part of the structure. So you immediately know, oh, there's a problem there isn't a problem here, I need to go and fix that. So the use of this for resilience and in the context of response and recovery is incredibly important. And then risk management. So we're not just kind of stopping at building the building, as I mentioned, we're actually helping our clients manage their risk. And so this is one of the things our digital team are doing at the moment, is putting together this platform to help manage risk and resilience. This is like a portfolio platform. It lets clients look across their whole portfolio about the risks that they're facing and where their resilience levels are. And obviously the next step is to kind of put real-time information into this as well. So this is kind of the direction we're going. And ultimately, this is the digital twin space. And so at Arup, we have a whole team that works in this space, and they've developed this platform called Neuron. And so it kind of brings together all this digital data. So we can take, the BIM asset management models and create this digital twin and manage things like, comfort within spaces, HVAC optimization, energy management, sustainability, everything. And so there's so much data within buildings now that, trying to get this in one place and understand what the impact of this is and how you can manage it is incredibly important. And this is really helpful, as I mentioned, for situational awareness. You kind of know what's going on if you've got this information in front of you, and it's kind of, you can make sense of it. Obviously, that's the important part. So we use this, as I mentioned, for all the things I've talked about previously, actually. So we can, for BIM, for augmented reality, simulation, and then real-time monitoring, so we can get that in one place. So here's a couple of examples. This is kind of at the city scale, which is pretty amazing. So you can see here the number of buildings that have been put into this project and a number of different systems that they can track, and you've got a nice dashboard to give you that information. And so, I mean, I'm not doing this on any of my projects right now, but this is really exciting, because this is where I want to go with it in terms of, mapping those systems that I showed you earlier, and then being able to have real-time information that kind of feeds back into those. And here's an example from of a building, a couple of buildings we're doing. So kind of monitoring those systems, energy management, environmental management, crowd management, alarms. So this is really exciting, and this is where it's all going.
Caroline, I think you've knocked your microphone. Your voice has gone a bit sort of.
Sorry. Is that
yeah,
better?
That's much better. That's brilliant.
I get too animated and excited. And then, thank you for telling me, though, because otherwise I'm sounding like a robot. But actually, that's pretty much the end of my presentation. So I just wanted to say, I suppose, reiterating how I started in terms of it's incredibly exciting, and data and digital is incredibly important tools in terms of helping resilience and helping us in general. But just to be aware of any vulnerabilities that you might be opening up. You've got all this information online. What happens if somebody taps into it? What would be the consequence of that? Can you work around this? And so it's just really thinking about those aspects as we transition and as we change, that we're not compromising our resilience. Thank you.